Day 2, Renju. Just the other way. Slide before it kills the bunny. Let's actually put money in our inventory this time. And then duplicate it. There we go. I voted last time's mistakes. There, get better. Oh, where did the bunnies go? There we go. To be sure. Just running Eye of Cthulhu is so that... Oops. Eye of Cthulhu is so that Dryad spawns. It's kind of obscure, but Dryad can only spawn if Eye of Cthulhu, Skeletron, Native Worlds have been destroyed. Native Worlds enough to kill this world, and Skeletron's going to be much later. I want Dryad to spawn as soon as possible, so that I can make sure to plant pumpkins and don't lose any time there. And it was fast. Oops, why am I doing that? Whatever. Doesn't matter. Doesn't slow me down, doesn't speed me up. What else? Life crystals. Shasha. Okay. This. I'll actually use those bag. And this. Oops, I double clicked there. This is helpful. Okay, I'm placing them up on the platforms so they spawn together and the bunnies don't hurt each other. They're spread out, they do that sometimes. They don't spread out. I want to hit at least once of my pickaxe though. Okay, so I get pallet bars. There we go. Let's go to store. I have to go after this room. How did they turn into one tile and turn it into well? No. This is an awful fight. There's a planter on the right there. Oh, I should have kept that demonite. That way I don't even have to fight it up worlds, would I? We have very, very fast jungle. same as last time, except probably even better. Where's the sleep spot? Okay, no, hold on. Okay, let's try this again. Okay, much better. Wait, yes. Nope, that didn't work because I didn't hit him. Whatever. Good idea for next time. Wait. How does... Oh, okay, I just wasn't hitting him before. That's what that was all about. Okay, the servant, interesting. I guess it all gets priority. Now I have the servant. What the heck? Okay, sure. Yeah, why not? I love how the devotee just like angrily chants on. I'll keep chanting, that'll summon him. I mean, sure, a guy's shooting at me with a freaking gun that vaporizes me, but whatever. I'm on my knees on my last little bit of health. Yeah, I'll summon this guy anyways. He's not doing anything. But I'll still try. It really is insane. No wonder they're called Lunatics. I think this might be faster, but I'm not sure. I haven't tested it. Oops, it's that one. Oh, the dragon isn't spawning. Oh. Okay, now this is faster. Oops. Next time he switches into the portal, I'll hit the wrong one on purpose, and hopefully it should delete the other guy. Maybe I can hit the right one. Actually, I want to test this. I think I can hit the correct one. Okay, it wasn't even giving it a chance. Yeah, that seems like it'll work. Now that there's raids here, I can't do the Staff of Earth. I should have placed a full block. I'm so sorry for the background noise, I can't help it. Wait, what? Okay, sure. Let's see if this works. If it doesn't work, then, screwed. Okay. That actually saved time. I need to smash this for once, not the other one. I need 2 ectoplasm. I really want it now, so I don't have to duplicate later. Hopefully one of these guys will have 2 ectoplasm in them. Yes, there's 2. Okay. Wow, 2 sealers. Oh, that's lucky. Okay, this might actually be an alright run, if I'm able to complete it. Yeah, that's no more. Oops, I just noticed this. Should have been paying a little bit more attention. There we go. They can die now. That was close. Wouldn't have mattered too much along in the melt thing, but it might have spawned, like, you know, whatever, an arms dealer, someone else, or a nurse. And then I might not have, would have to make more houses, and at that point it would have just been so scuffed. There we go, there's the guy. Checking my sources on them out. Sources on them would have helped a lot with this. I duplicated the wall bags, but I never actually used that farm. Might it still help? I think it might, even this late in the fight. Need to go to hell, I need to get hellstone, mithril, obsidian, and need to craft it into hellstone. 7. Or hellstone bars, sorry. Oh, I took it the bag. I was so scared. I was like, what? Why didn't I get it? A little bit of mithril, or calcium, whatever it feels like. There we go. I remember to do this time. All I need is 7. There's 10. Not terrible. Interesting. Oh, it's orichalcum. So orichalcum, 48 divided by 3, that's 16. I need at least 16. Where is it? Where is this orichalcum? There it is somewhere. There we go. Interesting spot. Yeah, there's a health forge here though, so that's cool. Oops. Okay, why did I... Okay, that works, I guess. Oh yeah, save an exit. Okay, let's turn up mob spawns. And... I need to make one of these. So that I can make one of these. So that... this works. Okay. Why did that not spawn mushrooms? Oh, I'm stupid. Here we go. Come on, mushrooms. No, that can't. That doesn't stop mushrooms, does it? I hope that doesn't stop mushrooms. Oh, here. There we go. I need to kill 50% of them. Since it was fast. I need to kill 50% of them for Martian sausage start coming. The last time, I waited here after they were like past 50% for like 5 minutes and nothing spawned. So hopefully it should be better. I don't need to be a master. Unlike Mothron, the Martian saucers drop the thing I need with, it doesn't matter what difficulty it is. Yes, okay. Yeah, clarification, they don't have to spawn after 50%, but they have a much higher chance. Oh, they have a much higher chance. What is that? Jesus Christ, okay. Wow. Okay, that's spooky time. Wow, that was unexpected. Okay. Okay. I need to get to all pumpkin as fast as possible because the higher waves, each pumpkin has a better chance to drop the weapon I need. I can't remember what it's called. Horseman's Blade, that's what it is. And so much mana. How do I get Zenith and so much mana like you? The mana is just from my headgear, that you can get Fallen Stars, which gives you mana stars, and you can get up to 200 mana that way. How do I get Zenith? Well, if you're playing on Journey mode, do all the stuff I'm doing. Oh god, okay. My laptop just decided to turn off after I was looking at comments. I'm using it as a second monitor. Are you new to Terraria? So if you are new to Terraria, I'd say just play through the full game, get used to it. I mean, just have fun, enjoy it. Don't worry about getting like the final weapons or whatever as soon as possible. That's not my concern. Just enjoy the game. Yeah, you can look up plenty of tutorials on how to get it and all the stuff you need. You need to defeat the final boss in the game and then some. I mean, I already defeated the final boss like 10 minutes ago, and I still need to do all this other stuff just to get it. It requires 10 different swords. Come with fire last present for 1 minute at a time. Oh, okay, that's because I'm using Journey mode. I assume you're just using normal 1.4. That's probably the more fun way to play. But for speedruns, I enjoy Journey mode more, which gives you, I mean, what some people would call cheats. But in God mode, you have infinite health and infinite mana. So you see, it's like, my mana's like fluttering, it's kind of flickering. It's trying to go down, but then it instantly goes back up because I'm using God mode. In a normal mode, it would never be like this. You'd have to constantly be using Magic Push. Oh, here it goes. Wow. Okay. Here it goes. What was it? Conch? What do we need? I should have practiced this part. Oh, there's the Muramass on the seed. Sounds so good. Yeah, sorry. I thought you might have been new to Terraria. I didn't realize you just want to play Journey mode. Do you play on console or something where Journey mode hasn't yet come? Okay, Enchanted Sword World. The reason I choose is that 1 in 50 chance I get an Arcalis, which in this case I don't want. Okay. Now Corruption, huh? Oh yeah, okay. Now I remember what I need to do right as I get here. Crap, did I not save the health horde? I didn't save the health horde, that's stupid. That's a pointless time loss. So now I need to make a furnace. Do I have everything I need? Is that this end? No, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Where are the other ones? Where are the other ones? Hold on. Why am I spacing? Oh, copper. Crap. Why am I blanking on this one? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. What am I missing? What's the one that I'm missing? I have the 2 Moonlord swords. I have the... What else should I have by this point? What else should I have? What else should I have? Why don't I have the thing up? Why am I not making this right now? What am I doing? What am I doing? How do I not know this? I've run this run so many times. Starfire! Crap, I can't remember if it was on this world or the other one. I think it was on... No, it wasn't this one. Okay. Well, that was a pointless time loss as well, but hey. I call it time save for next run, okay? I already used that joke today, but I'm allowed to use it twice. Okay, and there we go. 32-22. God, sub 30 would be so easy if I just didn't make those silly mistakes, but I got really good plant RNG. I got really good Martian and Pumpkin RNG. I got 3 Martian probes in a row, basically. Pumpkin then dropped at, like, what, wave 10? So I got good RNG, but I did not play as well as I could have. Okay, I think I could get sub 30 one of these days. But I've got to go now. And thanks for coming to the stream, everyone. I hope you come tomorrow. I should be streaming tomorrow. I should be streaming most weekdays at about the same time, hopefully 4-ish in the afternoon to about 7 or 8 in the evening. I will see you guys later.